The wind cut across Hollow Creek Ranch like a blade, sharp and unforgiving, carrying the smell of snow and cattle and old pine. It was the kind of December morning that made a man question every choice that had tied him to this lonely stretch of land. Jedediah Cole stood on the porch with a tin mug warming his hands, watching his breath rise in pale ghosts. Inside the house his kids were already stirring, boots thudding, voices low and sleepy. Christmas was 3 days off, and the ranch felt heavier than usual. Quieter, too, like it was holding its breath. Jed had lived with that quiet since his wife passed. But this morning it felt different, restless, like something was about to break the stillness wide open. The sound came from behind the barn, a thin, broken sound that did not belong to any animal Jed owned. The kids heard it first. Tommy paused mid-step and tilted his head. Sarah froze with one boot half-laced. "That a person?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Jed set his mug down and reached for his coat. "Stay inside," he told them, but they were already moving. Curiosity stronger than cold, the three of them crossed the yard together. Snow crunching underfoot, the barn loomed dark and familiar. But what waited behind it was anything but. She was crouched near the old fence post, wrapped in a thin shawl that had once been blue. Her shoulders shook as she cried. Long dark hair tangled by wind and snow clung to her face. She looked up when the kids stepped closer, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Sarah gasped and rushed forward without thinking. "Miss, are you hurt?" she asked, kneeling in the snow. The woman tried to speak, but only a sob came out. Jed felt something tighten in his chest. This land had seen drifters before, trouble too, but never this. Never someone so clearly broken by the road. Jed cleared his throat, keeping his voice calm and low. "Ma'am, you can't stay out here. You'll freeze." The woman looked at him like he was a mirage, then slowly nodded. Her hands were red and cracked, her boots worn nearly through. Tommy shrugged off his coat and held it out. "Pa used to say, folks help each other out here," he said, his voice trying to sound grown. The woman took the coat with shaking fingers, a whisper of thanks barely carried by the wind. And just like that, the rules of Jed Cole's quiet life shifted inside the house. The fire roared to life. The smell of wood smoke and coffee filled the room. The woman sat stiffly at the table, hands wrapped around a steaming cup. Her name was Clara Mae, she said softly. She had been walking for 2 days after the wagon she'd been riding broke an axle, miles up the road. No family close, nowhere to go. Jed listened without interrupting. His kids watched her with open faces, not fear but concern, the kind that came naturally to those who had already learned loss. Clara glanced at the small Christmas tree in the corner, a modest thing with handmade ornaments, and her eyes filled again. "You can stay till the storm passes," Jed said finally, his voice firm but not unkind. Clara looked up in surprise. "You sure? I don't want to be trouble." Jed shook his head. "Trouble is a choice. Weather isn't." The kids grinned at each other, already planning where she might sleep. Sarah insisted on lending her a sweater, too big but warm. Tommy fetched bread and stew. The house felt fuller than it had in years. Laughter crept back into its corners. Even Jed felt it. That strange warmth that had nothing to do with the fire that night. Snow piled against the windows. The wind howled like a living thing. Clara helped Sarah string popcorn for the tree, her fingers clumsy at first, but growing steadier. She hummed an old tune under her breath, one Jed dimly remembered from dances long ago. He watched from his chair, heart heavy and light all at once. This woman carried sorrow, that much was clear. But there was strength there too, the kind forged by long miles and hard choices. He wondered what road had led her here, behind his barn, on the edge of his carefully guarded solitude. When the kids finally fell asleep, Clara stood by the window, watching snow swirl under the moonlight. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Most folks would have turned me away." Jed leaned against the doorframe. "I got kids," he replied. "They remind me what matters." Clara nodded, eyes shining. Christmas morning would come soon, and Jed had a feeling this one would not pass like the others. Something had changed the moment his kids found her crying behind the barn. Something that would not end when the snow melted the morning after Clara arrived. Hollow Creek Ranch seemed less like a lonely stretch of land and more like a place where the world might still hold a little kindness. The snow had settled into soft drifts, the sun glinting off its surface like scattered diamonds. Jed and the kids were out feeding cattle, Clara following at a careful distance, still shy but determined to help. Tommy handed her a bucket. "You can do this," he said. She smiled, a little unsure, but there was something in the way she moved, steady and deliberate, that made Jed notice. Like a horse breaking through the snow for the first time after a long winter, there was a strength in her, quiet but undeniable. Breakfast that day was simple: eggs and bacon, coffee black and strong, but the conversation was alive. Clara listened more than she spoke, but when she did, her words had a gentle humor that drew smiles from the kids. Sarah asked about her family, and Clara's eyes darkened for a moment. "I lost them," she said simply, and that was all she would say. Jed felt the familiar pull of sadness for her, but he also felt something else: hope. Like maybe the stormy winter of his own heart had finally found a companion for its long nights. Days passed with Clara slowly settling into the rhythms of the ranch. She helped with chores, learned the names of the cattle, discovered the stubborn mule who refused to budge without coaxing. Jed watched her with quiet approval. There was a sense of belonging starting to grow between her and the kids. They laughed at her clumsy attempts at milking. She laughed at theirs, and for the first time in years, Jed felt his walls start to crumble. It wasn't just Christmas magic, it was real, grounded in the snow, the cattle, and the warmth of a woman who had arrived like a whisper of fate behind his barn one evening. The wind rose up again, shaking the cabin. The kids huddled close to the fire. Clara told a story of a winter spent on the plains with her grandfather, how he taught her to read the stars for direction. Jed listened silently, captivated. The storm outside seemed smaller, less threatening, as if the fire they shared inside had grown large enough to hold the world at bay. He realized then that this Christmas might be unlike any he had known, that it might mark a turning point for all of them. Not just the kids' days became weeks, and the little house felt warmer in more ways than one. Jed found himself noticing small things: how Clara hummed while stacking wood, how she left a trail of warmth in every room she entered. The kids noticed too, teasing Jed about his sudden cheerfulness. He grunted but smiled secretly. One evening, after dinner, he and Clara found themselves outside, brushing snow from the fence rails, hands occasionally brushing, each touch a spark neither could ignore. The silence between them was comfortable, weighted with unspoken words and possibilities. The ranch seemed to hold its breath. Christmas Eve arrived with the sky streaked in pink and orange, the kids excited and bouncing. Clara helped them wrap a few simple gifts, her laughter filling the kitchen like a song long forgotten. Jed stood by the door, watching, heart tight, with a mixture of longing and relief. He realized this woman had become part of their lives, part of their small, rugged family. She hadn't just survived the snow and the storm. She had found a place here, and perhaps more importantly, she had found a home, if only temporary, behind the barn that had first held her tears that night. After the kids fell asleep, Jed and Clara walked out to the barn. The stars overhead brilliant in the clear winter sky, the air crisp, sharp as a knife. Jed spoke first. "I didn't expect anyone out here." "Not really." Clara smiled softly. "Neither did I," she said. "But fate has a way of showing up when you least expect it." Their hands met, tentative at first, then holding firmly, a warmth spreading that had nothing to do with fire. For the first time in years, Jed allowed himself to imagine a future, even a small one, with someone who could stand beside him through winter storms and quiet mornings alike. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. The kids woke to find Clara sitting with a tray of cocoa and pancakes. Simple, perfect, their eyes wide with wonder and joy. Jed joined them, and for a few hours, laughter and cheer filled every corner of the cabin. No one thought of loss or loneliness, only of warmth and presence. And as Clara watched Jed with the kids, she realized she was beginning to care deeply about this man, this family, the home she hadn't known she was searching for. And she wondered silently if he felt the same. The snow falling outside like a soft promise that some things were meant to stay. After Christmas passed, the snow continued to fall, thick and soft, blanketing Hollow Creek Ranch in silence. But inside the cabin, life moved with a new rhythm. Clara had become indispensable, helping with the chores, cooking, even teaching the kids to read better in the evenings by the fire. Jed watched all of it, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. There was a light in the house now, one that didn't flicker with loneliness but shone steadily with belonging. He realized that the woman who had been found crying behind the barn had not only healed a part of his heart, but had brought warmth and hope into a place he thought only held cold and memory. One morning, Clara and Sarah were walking to feed the chickens when Clara paused, kneeling to brush snow off a nest. She smiled at the tiny eggs, her hands gentle, her voice soft as she spoke about new beginnings. Jed watched from the porch, the sight tugging at him. He felt the pull of a future he had never dared to imagine. Clara's presence was no longer temporary. It had rooted itself into the very soil of their lives, and he realized that some wounds could heal not with time alone, but with the courage to open one's heart. Jed found himself talking to Clara Mae, sharing stories of his late wife, of the days when the ranch had seemed endless and lonely, and she listened, never judging, always patient, gently reminding him that life, even in its harshness, could offer second chances. The kids joined in too, their laughter echoing across the snow-laden fields. Clara had become part of their rhythm, part of the family that had once been only Jed and his children. She stayed longer than a guest, longer than the storm, longer than anyone had expected, and the ranch seemed fuller, warmer, alive in a way Jed hadn't known in years. Winter deepened, the nights longer and darker, but inside the cabin, warmth persisted. One evening, Clara and Jed found themselves sharing a quiet supper. No one else around, the fire crackling, the wind moaning outside. Jed finally spoke, voice low but steady. "Clara, I never thought I could. Want someone again?" She reached for his hand, fingers intertwining. "I've been afraid," she admitted, "but I think the storm behind the barn was the beginning of something neither of us expected, and neither had to be alone again." The confession hung in the air, fragile and real, and for the first time in a long while, Jed felt the weight of grief lift, replaced by a gentle hope. By February, Hollow Creek Ranch was humming with life, the snow still deep but manageable. Clara worked alongside Jed in the fields, teaching the kids lessons of resilience and hope. Jed found himself planning for the future in ways he hadn't dared before. From repairing the barn to dreaming of a summer garden, Clara encouraged him, her presence a steadying force. The kids adored her, following her wherever she went, laughing, learning, and sometimes silently hoping this woman would stay for good. Their prayers, unspoken, seemed to be answered each day as Clara became part of the fabric of their lives. One morning, while mending a fence with Tommy, Jed realized he couldn't imagine a day without Clara there. She had changed the rhythm of the ranch, of their hearts, of the very air they breathed, and he decided, without fanfare, that he wanted her to stay, not just through winter, not just for the kids, but forever. He had no grand gesture in mind, just a quiet promise, something spoken in glances and shared tasks, in laughter at the table and the comfort of hands held on cold mornings, and he sensed that Clara felt the same, their bond growing stronger with each snowstorm. Each shared chore, each evening by the fire spring hinted at its arrival. Snow melting into streams, ice thawing, the ranch waking from its long slumber. Clara walked with Sarah and Tommy along the creek, teaching them to look for signs of new life, of resilience. Jed followed behind, heart swelling, knowing that this woman had transformed more than the cabin or the barn. She had transformed him. They had transformed him all. Grief had made way for love, isolation for family, and he knew that no matter what storms came next, they would face them together, stronger, connected, and unafraid. The snow of winter had given way to something enduring, something bright. That night, the family gathered around the fire, Clara, Jed, and the kids, the house filled with warmth and laughter. No one spoke of the day she was found behind the barn, but all of them carried the memory in quiet gratitude. Jed glanced at Clara, her eyes meeting his, and in that moment, they understood each other perfectly. She had stayed for Christmas, and longer, and now she would stay for every day that followed. Their hearts stitched together like the patchwork quilt on the bed, the ranch alive with love, and for the first time, Jed realized the truth he had never dared speak aloud. Home isn't just a place, it's the people you choose to keep close, and he had chosen her.